Hello, first grade writers. Let's keep going on our fiction stories. Today, I'd like to talk to you about problems and how to add a problem to your story. So far, you have come up with your main character and you told some things that you know about that main character. You also wrote on your story hand who your character or characters are and where the story takes place. Yesterday, we started to talk about adding a problem to the story. Today, we are definitely going to add a problem to our story because that is what makes a story so interesting. Now, let me tell you about some types of problems that authors might include in their story. Sometimes authors might want to add a problem that's really funny in their stories. I have this little poster here that shows a picture of a dog, and the dog is thinking, he will never find his underwear. It says, the story includes a funny event. This is just a poster that if we were in school, I would hang up, and it reminds us that we can add a funny problem to our story. Remember when we read the book Potato Pants? That story was full of funny problems. The funny problem is that the potato can't find any pants that are right for him, right? It's a silly thing that's happening. He can't find pants for a potato. That's so silly. I have the main character in my story, Matilda Moo. She owns a pizzeria. If I wanted to add a funny problem to that story, maybe I could say like, she bakes all of her pizzas, but when they come out of the oven, they've all turned into cakes instead of pizzas. That would be like a silly problem that Matilda has, a funny thing. Her pizzas aren't really pizzas, they turn into cakes. Remember, you can be as creative as you want here. There is no right or wrong answer for what kind of problem you want to put in your story. Another kind of problem that authors might put in their stories is a quest. So here on this poster, it says, I'm going to train this dragon. And it says the character in the story is trying to accomplish something. This made me think of the story Not Quite Narwhal, where the unicorn goes on a quest to try to figure out who he really is. Is he a narwhal? Is he a unicorn? He has to go to the unicorns to find out what he really is. And so he's on this quest to figure it out. A quest kind of problem is when your character is trying to accomplish something. So they might be traveling like the unicorn in that story did, or they might just be trying to learn how to do something. Another kind of problem that we see in books a lot is good versus evil. So like a battle between good and evil. This says, the character has to overcome the villain. Now, I'll give you a hint about my story. I have my story all thought out already, so I can already tell you this. In my story, Matilda Moo is going to have a thief. She is going to have to overcome this evil thief that's going to steal some things from her. So in my story, I am using good versus evil because I'm showing Matilda against a bad character who's going to come into her life. Another type of problem is a happily ever after kind of problem. So this says the characters in the story live happily ever after. So maybe after your character does whatever they're supposed to be doing in the story, everybody just lives happily ever after, and the problem is solved and they go on with their lives forever. I showed you these 4 kinds of problems just to give you examples of things that authors might include. Like I said, there's no right or wrong problem to put in your story. You can make it as silly or as crazy or as creative as you want it to be. So think about what sorts of problems your main character could run into. Let's say your main character is a dinosaur. What kind of problems would a dinosaur run into? If your main character is a tractor, like Otis, what kind of problems would a tractor run into on a farm? Well, in the Otis books, we know that he actually, in the very first Otis book, he actually meets this bigger, stronger tractor, and that tractor pushes him out of his home in the barn. And so that's kind of like good versus evil. The big tractor pushed out Otis, and so he was kind of like a bad guy in the story. Think about how you want your story to be interesting. And once you figure it out, you are going to write that down up here in the problem cloud. Now, I said that my problem was going to be that Matilda Moo has a thief in her life. This thief is going to steal some things from her. So I'm going to write that down for my problem. Now, I just wrote a few words here for my problem. You don't have to write a whole sentence. You don't have to write a lot of words if you don't have them. You just have to write some notes so that you remember what you want these main parts of your story to be. So here in this cloud, just writing a few words about what you want your problem to be. And I said, a thief comes to steal Matilda's things. So like I said, that's kind of like a good versus evil. Now, eventually we'll be coming up with a solution to the problem. You might not have thought that far ahead in your story yet, so we'll pause on that. But just so you know, the solution to our problem is going to go right down here at the bottom of the story hand, because that is going to be where we write down how the problem got solved in the end. Now, the next 3 fingers on your story hand say event 1, event 2, and event 3. In order to fill those in, you are going to have to think of at least 3 things that happen in your story. Right now, I'm going to read to you the story that I wrote about Matilda Moo, and hopefully that will give you a better idea of how our fiction stories can work. So, I have a whole fiction story that I've already written about Matilda Moo, and here it is. Matilda Moo was a cow who owned a pizzeria. She loved making pizza for all her friends. Her friends loved the special cheese that Matilda used because it was so delicious. Everyone in the town agreed that Moo Pizza was the best. See how I used more than 2 sentences on that first page? And I told who is in my story, Matilda Moo, and where she lives. She lives in a town and she owns a pizzeria. That's where the story will take place. Petey the pig was one of Matilda's biggest fans. He wanted to have his birthday party at the pizzeria. When he went to talk to Matilda about the party, he discovered something terrible. Now, I didn't tell you what the problem was yet on this second page that I wrote. I'm just telling you a little bit more about the events in the story. On the next page is when I will tell you the problem. I'm going to try to make the story as detailed as possible. Here's the problem. All the cheese and all the sauce and all the dough had been stolen. Oh no! So there's Matilda and Petey, and they are shocked. All the supplies had been stolen. Now here's where we get to hear the two characters talking to each other, and I'll teach you how to add that in your story in a few days. Matilda said to Petey, "We have to get it back." Petey said to Matilda, "Do you have a bad feeling about this?" So now, as the person who's hearing the story, you might be coming up with solutions to that problem in your mind. You'll get to see how the story plays out right now. Meanwhile, across town, Mortimer the Bull was trying to make pizza with the dough and the cheese and sauce he had stolen from Matilda. He had been to Matilda Moo's pizzeria, and he was very jealous of her success. He had decided that he wanted to open up his own pizza place, but he needed supplies. That's why he snuck into Matilda Moo's one night and took her pizza making supplies. Unfortunately, he was not very good at making pizza. Do you see how Mortimer the Bull, he tried to throw the pizza dough up in the air, but it ended up landing on his head? That's why I wrote, he's not very good at making pizza. He's trying, but it's not working for him. Mortimer is kind of like the bad guy in the story because he stole all the stuff. One day, Mortimer walked by Matilda Moo's pizzeria and he noticed a "for sale" sign. Mortimer instantly felt terrible. He made a decision to apologize to Matilda and give her supplies back. Without the pizza supplies, Matilda would not be able to make any money. So he feels really bad that Matilda's pizzeria is closing. She can't pay for her pizza place because she doesn't have any pizza. Mortimer stole it all. Mortimer's starting to feel guilty. Mortimer went to Matilda's house. He brought a big ball of dough with him. He was very sad and very sorry. He knocked on the door, and when it opened, he saw Matilda and Petey inside, crying. He announced, "I have a surprise for you." "I'm sorry, I was just jealous. I should not have stolen the pizza supplies. Will you forgive me?" There's the picture of Petey and Matilda inside the house crying. Mortimer is apologizing though, so now the problem is getting solved. Eventually, Matilda was able to forgive Mortimer. She even decided to teach him to make pizza so he could help her in her shop. Mortimer was delighted to have a job, and he felt so good that Matilda had forgiven him. Mortimer was pretty good at making pizza, ... most of the time. The end. So there's Mortimer. He's trying his best, trying to make the pizza, but he still makes it land on his head every once in a while. So I read you that story so that you could get a good idea of what I'm expecting from you during this writing unit. Even though you're writing at home, you are still going to put as many details as you can into your fiction stories. Today, your job is to write down what the problem is in your story. You're going to put it right here on this cloud. And then you can start your second page of writing. On that first page, we said who's in the story and where the story takes place. On the second page, you are just going to tell some of the story. You're not going to tell the problem yet because you want your reader to get a little farther into the story before you give away that problem. I want you to come up with something that could happen on the second page. So, for example, on my first page, I wrote about Matilda, where she lives and what she does. On the second page, I introduced a new character, introduced Petey, the pig, and I wrote, Petey was one of Matilda's biggest fans. He wanted to have his birthday party at the pizzeria. When he went to talk to Matilda about the party, he discovered something terrible. So I'm setting up for the problem, but I didn't give away the problem yet. I'm just telling you about a normal day at the pizzeria. Petey the pig was there. He wanted to, Petey the pig loved to eat pizza there, and he wanted to have his birthday party there. A really normal day. So your job is to come up with some sentences to put on your second page about what could be the next event in the story. What would a normal day be like for the characters in your story? Go ahead and get started on that, and I will see you for another writing lesson about events in our story tomorrow. Bye.